Welcome to the International Broadcast Ministry of No Limits. I am Pastor Delman Coates, and here at No Limits, we want to help strengthen you, encourage you, and empower you to feel God's love and to live your life without limitation. Today's message is about to begin, and I want to thank you for watching and know that I'm praying for you to hear a special word from God as you watch. There's a word right there in verses 19 through 21. The word of the Lord reads as follows. It says, "This is the testimony given by John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, 'Who are you?' And he confessed and did not deny it, but he confessed, 'I am not the Messiah.' And they asked him, 'What then? Are you Elijah?' He said, 'I am not.' 'Well, are you that prophet?' And he answered, 'No.'" And I want to preach today, church, from the thought, that's not me. Do me a favor, look at your neighbor, smile at him. Say, "Neighbor, I don't know who you think I am, but that's not me." All right, look at the one on the other side. Look at your spouse, your girlfriend, boyfriend, stranger. Smile at him. Say, "Neighbor, I know what you've heard. I know what you've been thinking, but that's not me." Come on, put your hands together. Give them praise. The importance of living a life of authenticity. I was shocked the other day to learn that impersonating a police officer is a major problem in America. You would think that people would have the sense to stay away from this kind of crime. But there's apparently something alluring about the power, the access, and the influence that one gets that makes it tempting for many people. I read about two men just last year right here in our area who represented themselves as federal agents, as members of the First Lady's security team. And when they were discovered, they were arrested for false impersonation of an officer, and as a consequence, they spent time behind bars. And that is what happens, church, when you engage in counterfeit behavior. Whether it's producing counterfeit goods, printing counterfeit cash, or impersonating an officer. When you get caught, it'll ruin your life, it'll wreck your future, and it will damage your ability to be taken seriously from that point on. Trying to be who you are not, being a fake and inauthentic, church, isn't just a problem in the underworld. It is also a problem in everyday life. I contend that there are many people today who are chained, incarcerated, and imprisoned, perhaps not by prison bars, but rather chained by the inability to just be themselves. According to Dr. Gabor Mate, here's what happens. There are these two interrelated yet distinct needs that we all have, and yet we struggle to reconcile them. On the one hand, we have a need for attachment and belonging. And on the other hand, we have a need for authenticity. Attachment is the need for connection and relationship with others, without which a child could not survive. An infant needs attachment, needs others, needs someone in his or her life, like a parent, to feed them, to care for them, and to nurture them in order to live. Authenticity, on the other hand, is the need to be in touch with how we feel, to know our desires and what we want, and to be able to express who we are and how we feel to other people. In prehistoric times, humans had to be in touch with their bodies and their senses and how they felt in order to survive in the wild. And so There's attachment, the need for belonging on the one hand, and authenticity, the need to be oneself on the other. Fine so far. We can all understand that, amen. The problem, Gabor Mate says, is that sometimes our need for authenticity begins to threaten our attachments. Take, for example, the baby who cries because she wants some candy before dinner, or the infant who screams because he's afraid of the family dog, but the parents don't want the child to cry. And so they send messages to the child that they want the child to just be quiet. They express their disapproval through stares and evil looks and yelling or withholding affection or even spanking. And so the child is now faced with a dilemma. Do I stay connected to my feelings, or do I prioritize my attachment to my parents? If I express myself, if I say what I desire, if I give voice to my feelings, there's a real chance that they won't love me, accept me, feed me, or take care of me any longer. And so what most babies do, says Mate, when confronted with this choice between attachment and authenticity, is that they suppress their authenticity. I'm working on something. They choose the approval of others over being true to themselves. And that 3-week, 3-month, 3-year-old child grows up to be an adult who at 23, 33, 43 and beyond has learned all his or her life to put the attachment to others, a parent, a sibling, a friend, a spouse, society, or the church, over the need to be true to themselves. They have learned all of their lives that it's just too risky, it's just too costly to be in touch with their feelings or to be their authentic selves than to maintain their attachment. If they voice how they feel, their family system, their social circle, their community of faith just might reject them. And so there are so many people who desire to be themselves. They want to be themselves. That they want to express themselves the way they desire. They want to pursue the kind of careers they desire. They want to like and love who they choose, but they're afraid that if they do that, they'll be rejected by those around them. And I've discovered there are many people who don't even know how they feel or who they are because they have never learned how to get in touch with their feelings. And it is this tragic conflict between attachment on the one hand and authenticity on the other hand that leads many people to be inauthentic, to sacrifice self on the altar of other people's approval. They decide that it is better for others to like them than for them to like themselves. That it is better to put the opinions, the views, the acceptance, approval, recognition, validation, affirmation, and acknowledgement of others ahead of being true to themselves. The German philosopher Martin Heidegger noted the tendency of human beings to flee from what he calls the authentic ability to be self into the comforts of conformity. In other words, we allow our experiences and our behavior to be shaped by what others say, what others think, and what others do. It is to hold up a thermometer of public opinion to determine how we ought to dress, how we ought to move, and how we ought to live. But the path to true peace and happiness, church, does not come from losing ourselves, but instead it comes by affirming ourselves and getting in touch with who we are. In her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, let go of who you think you're supposed to be and embrace who you are. Brene Brown says that authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. It is choosing authenticity means cultivating the courage to be imperfect, to set boundaries, and to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. exercising the compassion that comes from knowing that we are all made of strength and struggle, and nurturing the connection and the sense of belonging that can only happen when we believe that we are enough. Can I tell you something? I say, can I tell you something? You are enough. Bump your neighbor and say, neighbor, you're enough. That was the wrong neighbor. Tell the other neighbor, say, neighbor, you are enough. Have I got a witness here? In fact, Bruno Mars was right. You are amazing just the way you are. That, I think, is the prevailing lesson in our text today, that the path to happiness and fulfillment in life is paved with stones of authenticity. Here, John the Baptist is confronted by those who observed him and his ministry, and they asked him 3 questions about his identity. The priests and the Levites wanted to know who he was. They asked him 3 questions. Are you the Messiah? Or are you Elijah? Or what about that prophet? And on each occasion, John the Baptist says, no, that is not me. He unapologetically and unashamedly tells them that he is not the man that they are seeking or that they believe him to be. In short, he is true to himself by being clear about who he is not, which I find instructive, because having a balanced and grounded and sober sense of your identity starts with being clear about who you are not. It is a commitment not to be inauthentic, a commitment not to present and project something that we are not, a commitment not to create a false profile or to exaggerate our sense of importance or our abilities. Not long ago, I saw a group of social media influencers who took a trip to a local private airport to take pictures in front of private planes. They had on designer bags, allegedly. They had on designer clothes, and they posted those pictures even though they were not going on a private trip. They got back in their Uber X and went back home to their apartment. We live in a world where people feel pressure to stunt like they have something going on when they really do not, to pretend that they are something that they are not, to create the allure that they are bosses when they don't own anybody and they aren't directing nothing. John teaches us that we all must have the capacity within ourselves to resist inauthenticity by knowing who and what we are not. When I meditated over this text, I'm struck, church, that John could have easily bought into the hype and the public perception of who he was. I mean, the Jews did send representatives to check him out, which means that his influence must have been really growing around town. It means that his brand and his reputation must have been spreading. And he could have easily said, yeah, that is me. I am that guy. He could have done what those social media influencers did. He could have just embellished his profile, but rather than having an inflated sense of self, John simply said, no, that's not me. How many of us are in touch with ourselves enough, or are self-aware enough to let people know that ain't me? You know, people will project onto you their ideas, their perceptions and assumptions of who they think you are and what you ought to be. Aren't you a pastor? Aren't you? Yeah. Aren't you always in the spirit? Aren't you always reading the Bible? Aren't you always on your knees praying? You're a woman of God right here. It's easy for you, isn't it, to be a working mom, a wife, to cook dinner every night, to help the kids with their homework, and then get them to their ball games 3 to 4 times a week, and then to come home and then meet the needs of your husband. You're a man of God, right? Yeah. And so it's easy for you to be a husband, a man of faith and work, 14 hours a day driving a truck to go to the corporate job and to deal with racism without letting people know how you feel about their microaggressions, and then to go home and be a loving and nurturing father to your kids. It's easy for you to do all that, right? And sadly, too many of us allow others to define who we are and to put us in a box that we don't fit in. We all know Edgar Allan Poe was a prolific writer. But as a child, his father insisted that he be a businessman and to join his mercantile business. Instead, Edgar Allan Poe decided to follow his passions and his dreams for writing. His father sent him to school to be a businessman and disapproved of him trying to be a writer. And when he did, when his son insisted on being a writer, his father disowned him. But had Edgar Allan Poe followed his father instead of following his heart, he would have never become one of the greatest writers in history. Let me ask you, what great opportunity have you been missing because you're trying to be what others want you to be? What possibility have you foreclosed upon listening to the voices of others rather than listening to the voice within yourself? One of the most important and impressive things about the story of King David was revealed in his battle with Goliath. They placed on him soldiers' armor and a uniform, and they gave him a heavy shield, and they put in his hand a big sword. But when David put it on, it did not fit him. And he knew that if he wanted to be victorious against the enemy, that if he wanted to defeat the giant, he had to do what worked for him. I'm talking to somebody here today. The reason so many people live inauthentically is because they never get to the point of realizing that you got to do what works for you, boo. Have I got a witness here? And perhaps they live inauthentically because they misunderstand the question that was posed to John. John was not asked about his achievements. Look in the text. John was not asked about his possessions or about his bank account. The question was not what family are you from or where were you educated or how many followers do you have. The simple question was, who are you? Not what do you drive? Not whether there's red paint underneath your shoes. Not what neighborhood do you live in. Not where did you go to college. Not what sorority or fraternity are you a part of. It's who are you? Who we are, church, should not be reducible or associated with the external trappings that life has to offer. Who you are is a question about the interior life. It is a question about one's internal essence. And yet, sadly, many people make the mistake of thinking that who they are is defined by what they do or what they have. Y'all not here. They equate their profession and their position and their possessions with who they are as a person. The problem with defining yourself by those things is that those things don't last forever. And so when those things are gone, the question becomes, who are you then? Who are you without the car, without the job, without the marriage, without the spouse, without the degree, without the position? That's what you do. That is not who you are. Money does not make you a man, because if the economy turns and your stock portfolio falls, then you're left to conclude that your manhood is gone. If who you are is synonymous with your job, then if your job relocates, then your identity is left in limbo. But when you have a deep appreciation for who you are, when you are comfortable in your skin, you are okay with who you are not. No, I'm not in that sorority. No, I'm not a part of that fraternity, no. I don't have a big job like that, no. I don't live in a gated neighborhood. All of you know that watermelons are round, right? But what if I told you that I saw a square watermelon? In fact, when you go home, I want you to Google square watermelons. And when you do that, you'll discover that in Japan, they have engineered and have learned how to grow watermelons in square boxes. And they do that so that the watermelons can fit neatly in compartments inside of their refrigerators. They also believe that a square watermelon is easier to slice because it won't roll. But while all of that might be true, the one problem is that when God made the watermelon, he made it round. He didn't make it to fit neatly and easily into someone else's box of convenience. He didn't make it to be compartmentalized and pigeonholed so that people could get their minds around it. He made it round. Can I tell you something? You got to get to a point where you learn to love yourself the exact way that God made you to be. Have I got a witness here? Tell your neighbor, you better love yourself. That was the wrong neighbor. Tell your other neighbor, you better love yourself. You better love your hips and your lips, your eyes and your thighs. You better love how God made your skin to be kissed by nature's sun. Love yourself. In order for John to say, I am not the Messiah, I am not Elijah, I'm not one of the prophets, John had to be clear-headed and comfortable. He had to be stable and secure about who he was. And I believe that there comes a time when we all have got to make peace with who we are not. The art of authenticity and the key to embracing your true self comes when you realize that you don't have to lie, you don't have to be fake, you don't have to put on airs, you don't have to be phony to be valued by God. God does not require us to be anything or anyone other than who God made us to be. And I don't care what the Republicans say, and I don't care what a political party says, and I don't care what your enemies and your ops say. You are amazing just the way you You don't have to project a sense of strength if you really don't have it. You don't have to suppress your true needs and desires and thoughts and wants and feelings just to be attached to somebody else. Just be yourself. Tell your neighbor, be yourself. One day, an older couple was talking to each other. And the wife said to the husband, honey, you used to always hold my hand. And immediately he reached over and took her hand. Then she said, baby, you used to always kiss me all the time. And instantly he leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. And then she said, honey, you used to always nibble on the back of my neck, and I used to love that. And suddenly he got up from the table and started walking away. And she asked, well, where are you going, baby? And he said, to get my teeth. Can I tell you something? It's okay. Just say, that's not me. That's not me. Look, I love many of the great homileticians and preachers of the gospel that God has blessed the world with. I appreciate their artistry, their rhetoric, their oratorical gifting. I'm amazed at their ministries and the scale and scope of what they have done in the earth. I admire a lot of preachers, but the breakthrough that I got in my life is when I realize that I can only be the best me that God called. There's only one Delman. Don't you get it twisted. And I had to learn that God made me a designer's original, and I am not going to die trying to copy somebody else. Listen here, you better learn how to be yourself. That's what's at stake here in the text. John is a role model for us because had John tried to fit in who they thought he was, maybe he would have been chosen later on by Jesus to be a disciple. Think about that. As great and as significant as John the Baptist was, he was never chosen to be a part of the 12. Who wouldn't want to be in that circle? All John had to do was to embellish his credentials. And maybe he would have been chosen by Jesus to be one of the boys. But John was so secure in himself. He said, no, man, that's not me, because John knew that sacrificing his authenticity was not worth being included in the group. Can I tell you something? Being included with the crowd is not worth you compromising your value, your integrity, your identity, and who you are. John understood that it was more important for him not to ignore his needs, to resist the urge to let belonging take precedence over his life. He said, no, son, that ain't me. And I want to tell someone listening to me here today that if they never call your name, if they don't ever give you a plaque or a trophy, if they don't ever give you serious consideration, if you never see your name on the marquee or on the program, if the pastor never mentions the role you played or the service that you gave, please try not to let it bother you, because you may not be on their radar, but you on God's radar, and that's all that matters. Tell your neighbor, that's all that matters. You got to be yourself. And being yourself means you got to reject inauthenticity, because when you are inauthentic, it has implications for your health. You do know that science says when you suppress your emotions and your needs, those emotions just don't evaporate. Those emotions that you hold in affect your nervous system. Listen here, sisters, women, particularly black women in our society, have been acculturated to hold in their emotions, to not express anger, to just go along, to put everyone else's needs ahead of their own needs. That's what patriarchy has imposed upon women, especially black women, because if you speak up on the job, if you share with your partner how you really feel about what's going on at the home, somebody will say you're getting out of line. They'll call you an angry black woman, and that result has resulted in women having a disproportionate amount of autoimmune diseases. They have been taught to spend their lives focusing on attachment to daddy, and attachment to mama, and attachment to the church, and attachment to a boyfriend or a husband, that in the process they deny themselves. But can I tell you something? The path to healing for somebody listening today is through authenticity. The pill that someone needs today is to change your emotional relationship with yourself, and to stop ignoring your own needs. Disease, church, is not oftentimes an invasion into your life of something from the outside. Disease is often a manifestation of the fears and the feelings, the thoughts and the desires, the sadness and the anger that's been growing on the inside of you. From the moment that we were born, we've been holding in stuff, holding in feelings, and holding in desires and holding in sadness and holding in rage. And that doesn't just evaporate. It ends up in the tissues and in the blood, and it becomes and manifests in sickness and disease. I've seen people who everyone regarded as so fun-loving. Oh, she's so nice. Oh my God. Brother so-and-so is always so positive. When in fact, the love they were showing others, they were denying themselves. On the outside, they were smiling. But on the inside, they were PO'd. They were angry because they could not tell their spouse how they really felt. On the inside, they were really frustrated because they could not express their identity. And so while others regarded them as such a nurturing person, what was really going on is that they were people pleasing and they were engaging in self-suicide, which was eroding the soul and causing them disease and stress and causing them to get involved in addictions and codependency. And God wants someone to be released today and emancipated today from other people's views and thoughts and voices and feelings about how you ought to live and how you ought to think and how you ought to express yourself. No, John says, that is not me. People see me all the time and they think, oh man, you must always listen to the Word Network. You're a pastor, right? Yeah. Wow, in your home, you must always be listening to Praise 104. And y'all know what I do? I say, no, son. That's not me. When I go home, I'm going to watch BMF. And then the next day, I'm going to catch up on Godfather of Harlem. And in 2 weeks, I'm going to be waiting on Power Book 2 the next season. That ain't me. And we have got to be liberated from other people's opinions about how we ought to live and how we ought to think. And that can only happen when we decide to quit being fake. When I was in high school, there was a friend of mine, there was a guy I heard about. And he looked older than the rest of us. And because he looked older than the rest of us, he was able to go to the convenience store to buy liquor, and he succeeded at doing it. We were teenagers. And this guy I heard about was able to go to the liquor store, buy Boone's Farm, Strawberry Hill, Country Quencher, Sea Breeze, Wild Irish Rose, Mad Dog. I'm having like a flashback. Ooh. Ooh. And whenever he was carded, he used to give the person at the counter a fake ID. It was an ID with someone else's name and birthday and address on it. And I'm not saying that when he did that I was around or that he did it for me and I partook of what was going on. I just heard about it. But eventually he got in trouble. He got caught for presenting a fake ID. And I've discovered that there are a lot of Christians using fake IDs, trying to convince people that they are something that they are not. Can I tell you something? You do not have to use a fake ID to be in the kingdom. When you know who you are not, you can honestly and openly be in touch with your own limitations and still tell the truth about the reality of who you are. Push your neighbor, say, neighbor, just be yourself. And I think that if we could just learn how to do that, it would help the witness of the church, because there are many people today who get turned off from the church by Christians who are unable to keep it real and to be honest about who they are. There are many people in the world who can't relate to many Christians because we are so high-minded and such holy rollers that we act like that we don't have any struggles, that we don't have any thoughts or desires, and we don't do things in the world. I saw this video, maybe y'all saw it on social media a couple weeks ago, of this woman in ministry who said that Christians who go to Beyonce concerts are the devil. Well, the other day when I registered for the lottery, for the tickets, I hadn't heard what the sister had said, but can I tell you something? If I get the tickets, Pastor is going to the Beyonce concert. I will be at No, that's not me. Tell your neighbor, that ain't me. I pray, but I also enjoy myself. I read my Bible, but I'm a human being. I told y'all some time ago, I'm tired of these people out here making it seem as if in order to be a Christian is synonymous with being weird. You can love God without being weird. You can pray and seek the face of God and without being weird. And somehow John owns the fact that their assumptions about who he was were wrong. Their estimation about him required him to try to fit into their tiny boxes. But for some of us, the liberation in this next season will come when you learn how to say, no, child, that is not me. It is a radical stance vis-a-vis the world to choose to be yourself. It is a decision not to worry about pleasing everybody else. Have I got a witness here? John MacDonald wrote, my choice is to be real, to be authentic down to the core of my soul, which will change me forever. He said, I don't want to pose. I don't want to posture. I don't need a pat on the head or a slap on the back. I'm not looking for applause because I want to be real. Wouldn't it be wonderful to be a part of an authentic church? Wouldn't it be awesome to be a part of a real community of faith? I don't mean a perfect church. If you're looking for a perfect church, the moment you join, it's no longer perfect. I'm talking about an authentic church. I got all the stories today. I remember when I was in college. I remember the first time I went to New York City. It was my freshman or sophomore year in college. I got my mom's car. She had a blue Volvo. And I got in the car, got some other my buddies from Morehouse. We got in the car. We drove along the East Coast to visit graduate schools. Stopped by Howard Divinity School, then we went on up to Princeton Seminary, then we went on up to Yale in New Haven, Connecticut, then we went to Boston, the Harvard Divinity School, and on the way back down, we stopped at Union Theological Seminary in the city of New York. I had never been to New York, and I was in awe of all of the big buildings, and I was looking forward to the chance to go shopping in New York City. Oh man, there I was on Madison Avenue, and there I was just going around to all the stores. And some kind of way, I ended up in Chinatown. And when I was in Chinatown, there was a guy who came up to me with a briefcase, and he opened it, and he had watches in it. And the man had Rolex watches in his briefcase. He said, you want a Rolex watch? I said, sure. So I took the Rolex watch and I put it on my hand, put it on my arm, and I checked it out. I said, wow, wow, look good with this little Rolex watch. So I said, how much for it? He said, $80. I said, man, this is great. I got a deal. A Rolex watch for $80. You can't beat that deal. I gotta say, man, give me that watch. And I put it back on, went back uptown, looked up with my boys. We drove back to Atlanta. 2 days later, the Rolex watch stopped working. And by the end of the week, it fell apart because it was counterfeit. Nobody likes a counterfeit. Nobody wants a counterfeit. And I'm not interested in counterfeit Christianity either. Who wants anything to do with a counterfeit Christian? I've discovered that there are many relationships that end because people, when they meet one another, they present the representative on the front end. They present the representative, put your best foot forward. So in the beginning, every day, hair done, nails did, get dressed up nice. Tell your neighbor, in the beginning. Brush your teeth, gargle, in the beginning. You want to go to church every Sunday in the beginning. And then y'all link up, commit to one another. You might get married. And then 3 to 5 years later, you decide to let your hair down. And then the real person then comes out. Because you were not able to just be yourself on the front end. I decided not long ago that when I meet people, I'm just going to be myself. I'm a pastor, but I'm going to the Jeezy concert in Baltimore next month. Are y'all here today? If we would just learn how to be authentic and to be genuine, then people can get in touch with the real person. And I believe that the world would respect us more and we wouldn't have all of this hypocrisy and all of this inauthenticity going around if we would just be ourselves. Tell your neighbor, be yourself. I read the other day how they train bank tellers to detect counterfeit bills. And what they do is that they teach the bank tellers to get familiar with real money. They teach them how to identify every facet and every feature and every aspect of real money. And by getting more and more familiar with the real thing, then they are able to detect and to identify something that is fake. And that was interesting to me because I thought that they would train people by showing them what counterfeit money looks like and feels like. Instead, they said that if you would just get familiar with what is real, then you'll have no problem identifying and how to spot a counterfeit. I want to tell somebody here today, just be yourself. Don't suppress your inner self. Don't sacrifice your authenticity on the altar of public acceptance, because when you betray yourself, you are committing the greatest crime that somebody can commit. Shakespeare said, to thine own self be true. And I believe that there are so many of us who would get the breakthrough that we're looking for if we were able to tell people, nah, that's not me.
After our first year of broadcasting weekly messages here on No Limits, it is clear that the most popular way to watch the program is through our free mobile app. If you already have the free No Limits mobile app, thank you for downloading. And I hope this app helps you each day in your walk with the Lord. And if you do not have the app, what are you waiting for? You can download this app for free right now from the App Store on either your Apple or Android device. This app contains the weekly message I preach, as well as free resources like a daily devotion and a Bible that contains a free reading plan. Before I go, let me ask you for a favor. please tell all of your friends about the No Limits mobile app, as we want to connect with more people and help them live a life with no limits. Learn more at delmancoats.org. That's delmancoats.org. Thank you for watching the message today, and I look forward to seeing you again right here next week for another episode of No Limits. I am so glad that you took the time to watch this message today. If you have been blessed by this outreach, I'd like to ask you to become a partner in this ministry so that together we can reach the world for Jesus Christ. My heart is to reach people just like you all around the world and to tell them that God loves them and wants to empower them to live a life with no limits. Your financial investment in this ministry will enable us to spread the good news of Jesus Christ around the world so that more people can be inspired and encouraged. Will you help me to reach those people? Will you join me in empowering the lost and the forgotten? Will you be my partner as we teach people to truly live a life with no limits? To make a donation safely and securely, go to our website at delmancoats.org. That's delmancoats.org. And look for the donate button on the top right of the homepage. Thank you in advance for your support and for becoming a true partner in No Limits. Your partnership and financial gift will help us impact the world by bringing hope to those who need it. Your generosity today is a reminder of the goodness of God. Thank you again for watching No Limits with Pastor Delman.
The preceding program was brought to you by the faithful supporters of No Limits and Mount Enon Baptist Church in Clinton, Maryland.